Hi, Rich. I just want to make a point of this one topic that I've mentioned a number of times the past few weeks. This feeling of continuing the extension in your body. So we could say this is part of the body rise, or we could simply say it's part of the lengthening process and the expression where your movement doesn't stop. So there's more to movement than traveling across the floor, moving across space. It's also the way that the body would continue to lengthen and the what we call intention and energy, that when you're pressing yourself into a rise, there's no static place in that, there's no stopping. There's a continuous energy into the floor and out of the floor, however you want to think of it, whether you want to think of pressing down or pushing up. Did make a point that when you reach the top of your rise, at that point you always want to feel as though you're the turtle bringing his head and neck out of the shell. So imagine the shell, of course, would be resting on your shoulders. So those muscles around the shoulder blade and the shoulder girdle would continue to move downward in order that your spine and neck can move upward. So there's a feeling of connection in your body as the spine continues to lengthen and the compactness of the shoulder girdle pressing down to unify the body. The other thing is, of course, in the rise, it's not merely through the feet and through the calves. You need to use the pelvic floor muscles. So if you try to pull your sit bones together, like when you sit on a chair, you have those little rockers at the bottom of your pelvis. If you try to pull the sit bones together, the pelvic floor muscles will contract, and this provides support from this base area, base of the pelvis, for the upper spine and the upper body. So in order to support myself in the rise, it's not just feet, not just ankles, calves. It's also the muscles around the top of the leg, back of the leg, and the seat muscles or the pelvic floor muscles that need to engage. So when you're wobbling the top of a rise, you want to find this unification of pelvic floor muscle support. Of course, those abdominal muscles working backward, pulling the low spine back, shoulders dropping down, and the ears moving up. Now, some people say stretch. I don't know that it's actually a feeling that we have when we're stretching. It's an elongation. It's a continuous energy that keeps on moving. So if I'm going into the promenade, in this case we're talking about your overturned turning lock. And as you take the last step of your turning lock, you place that foot to be pointing diagonal to center. And your body or your center will be more to the line of dance, which is what enables you to stay with your girl and also to create the opening for the girl. It's very easy for us to have only one direction in our mind. That's the direction I'm going to go next. So now I have no direction for my girl. So that's very important that you do that. So in doing that, I will have a feeling of my body overturning my leg. My leg and my foot are DC. So when I do this rotation of my body to stay with the girl, there's a lot of spiraling going on in my leg muscles and in the leg bones. I'm pressing my big toe to the floor so that when I rotate to the right, the big toe will not release and cause this wobble. So when I press my big toe down as my right thigh is working around to the right, there's a tremendous feeling of connection all through my base. So in addition to that then, I'm pressing against the floor and lifting the pelvic floor muscles, pulling the belly back, and I have that sense of pressing down through the shoulders. So I mentioned that I didn't really want you to drop your arms, but the arms appeared high because we were not getting this opposition of the shoulder girdle dropping down, pressing downward as the ears move up. So there you see my arms are going up a little bit with my shoulder in the rise. Usually when we do that, we also lose the engagement of the seat muscles. So there's all these different muscle groups that are working in opposition to make you stable and also give you the good form. Now, I have this scoliosis, so it can look as if I'm in this position because my right hip is always sticking up. But try to give you the right feeling here that I'm not really in that position. But my right hip, because of this rotation around the leg bones, my right hip is somewhat moving backward, as well as rotating somewhat to the right. Big toe is pressed into the floor, and I'm still using my left leg until it's time to push that penny. So I've talked about this many times that I feel as though when you get between your 2 and your 3, this suspension of the body seems to be lost. The elasticity or the continuous movement or the continuous use of the back foot, however you want to think about it, I'm hoping that you can see the energy that's not only working from the standing leg, but from the leg that's projecting from behind me. And then it will move out into position. It's very easy for that leg to just become loose. The other note, I was talking about your left arm and your left elbow. That's part of, I'm trying to exaggerate this extended feeling. That's part of my intention to send my energy out into the space ahead of me. Almost feels again as though there's an energetic pulling through my spine to my back, out through my elbow, but this space down through the leg, all across the trunk here, this feels very elongated. So when I'm watching you on the PC there, sometimes I'll see, like I said, the shoulders and the arms going up a little bit, or I may see you tilting loosely to the left with this elbow popping up. So you're going to feel the opposite. You're going to feel as though the left side on the diagonal is pulled. I'll turn around and do that from the back. What I hope you'll see is the way that the whole body is being used and my back leg is energetically alive the whole time. So again, try not to notice too much about my hip is sticking out there. But as I arrive here, you see the energy working from my back leg and my body elongating, having this feeling of reaching. Now, of course, I don't want my arm to fall out. I want it to stay here. But I want a certain energy. So the leg is working from the back, and then it needs to push the penny out. I made a point last week about talking about the rotation also in that back leg. If you're trying to be with your girl and you leave this leg turned out, now you can't stay with your girl. You cannot rotate your hips. So the hip structure, when it turns, you've got to think of this like a screwdriver. And so where you're connected to the screw, that needs to rotate and move out. So these are things we're talking about that have to do with artistry, quality, use of the right muscles in the right way, and this overall coordination of the body to keep the body connected. I want to go back then for a moment to the side lock, because I'm still feeling the same thing there, that there's a disconnection between your standing leg and the leg that you're leaving or trailing. So the exercise to do there is to rock the hips back and forth from foot to foot. Now at this point I have not yet achieved my finished alignment through my body. Got my foot pointing to the line of dance, and my body is an eighth of a turn left at the moment. As my body completes the turn, I want to make sure that I don't release this leg. I think we've talked about it before on the other video, but just looking at that point. So I'm going to think of my legs being the same length. That's one way to think of it. One way to think of reaching for the floor with my right leg. I'm going to think of shaping my ankle inward and allowing the pulling of my spine across the left foot to be what creates the locking action. I don't want to give up. Release the knee, pick it up, and place it back. Now I'm exaggerating that a little bit, but it's because I'm still seeing this loose happening in your leg. If you don't move the spine across the feet enough, if it's static here, you'll find that you don't have any space or balance, and so you'll simply pick up that foot and move it. So my belly button is still moving. It's going to move dynamically further than I would imagine. That requires again that I press now my left big toe down into the floor so that this dynamic line of energy from my big toe out through my leg is kept intact. I cannot allow that big toe to release. But I need to move my center to the point where it feels like I want to roll to the outside of the foot. So again, I'm pressing in as my hips move out. Now the other dimension of your hips are not moving in one dimension. They're not moving only sideways. As my center and my left hip is moving across my left foot, big toe down, I'm also putting my body into a coil, a three-dimensional curve. So my right hip is actually dancing forward. My right hip belongs to the girl. My right hip is expressed in the extension of her upper back and her head. Sometimes we say that my right hip belongs to her head, and my right hip is creating the shape in her head. So yes, I have a sway. I have a sway to the right. I also have this coiling in the body. Once again, here, I have my foot pointing to the line of dance, rocking my weight. Now we have a sway developing there. And also now my right hip is moving forward. So when I'm lowering there to create the next action, I'm not straight. One hip forward, one hip back. There's the sway, there's the rotation. Now, at the same time that my right hip is moving forward towards the lady, I'm working the muscles in my right shoulder blade to maintain this extension here. The right hip and the right elbow working away from each other. The right shoulder pinning itself down, so there's space in my arm for the girl, and I'm not following her with my shoulder and my hip. Okay, those are the two main things I've been wanting to talk about this week because they keep coming up. And I know there's many, many things you're thinking about, and you're getting much more complex movements in the body. So once you feel this, though, once you feel how the body moves in more than one dimension, and both legs are always active, right? And I want to use my standing leg to pull the other leg and not let the legs be loose. Same thing with turning lock. Not let the leg be loose. We could look at the impetus turn also as you're coming out of your heel turn. Now your left leg is not behind you. Now your left leg is together. I'll still have this feeling of pressing before I push the penny to move out. We don't want this looseness in that leg. So those are a couple details. I think, again, we have covered them before, but just to reiterate, and maybe there may be some things that I forgot to mention there. All right, Rich, I will see you on Friday.